Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today in the Dungeon Dive, we are going to take a look at Dragonbane. This is the new box set RPG from Free League Publishing. And Free League did provide this copy to the Dungeon Dive as a review copy. Let's take a little look at the back of the box here. In the oldest times, the world was ruled by dragons and demons. They were the primordial forces through which the world and its primeval matter was formed. They were opposing principles that made the world complete: law and order versus chaos and madness, dragons versus demons. And there's a little shot of everything you get. We are going to go over everything you get in the box in this new box set. And that will be the first part of this video. Then I'll go into my review, some of the things I like, some of the criticisms I have of Dragonbane. And then we'll talk a little bit about how I have set up my solo game to play, because Dragonbane does come with solo rules baked into the box. This is a new edition of an old game from Sweden, and I don't know too much about the old game. This is the first time I believe this game has ever been published in English, so it's nice to have this kind of introduction to the game. And I think one of the coolest things we get in this box set is this amazing map. This map is such an inspiration. You could just look at this map and come up with adventures. We have all of these adventuring sites on this land that represents the Misty Vale. This is the campaign setting that this box set is set in, and a lot of that will be touched upon in the Book of Adventures. And this map is, I love this map. I've just been looking at this, and every time I notice a little detail, I think about a different kind of adventure that I could have in this land. And it really does seem like we're kind of in this golden age of RPG box sets. I don't know if that's actually true or if that's just my perception, but even going back to the latest kind of D&D 5e box sets, the Essentials box set and the new starter set is really, really good. And a couple of those adventures in there are kind of like S-tier adventures. We have that Zweihander box set. We have the Forbidden Lands box set, also from Free League. And then Free League also has box sets for, Blade Runner and Alien and the One Ring, Lord of the Rings. I think a Walking Dead RPG box set is coming out. We have that new Call of Cthulhu starter set. I don't know, man. It's such a great time to be into tabletop gaming right now. And I think it's just really important for us to recognize how lucky we are to be living through this new era of all kinds of games. Because no matter what kind of gamer you are, it seems like there's a game that is kind of tailor-made for you. But so let's take a look at the rules first. We'll talk a little bit about the game. The game is, I would say, it's a rules a medium light rules game. It's definitely a little more complex than something like Morkborg, but I think it's even less complex than something like D&D 5e. I think it is a good starter game. The rulebook itself is 112 pages. It's pretty well written. A lot of those pages are taken up by the wonderfully illustrated bestiary at the end, and a pretty huge portion of the book is also spells. So the actual rules don't really take up very much space. There's the credit page, so you can see all of the people who worked on this game. And yeah, it's a pretty neat game. It's doing some very interesting things here. In the preface here, we do get a little bit of context of the older game. I would have loved to have seen the history portion of this a little more elaborated upon, maybe with some images from some old magazines or some old advertisements, so those of us outside of Sweden could see how this original game was presented and kind of the cultural impact that it had, because I am completely unaware of that. We get a little bit of an introduction here, an introduction to what is an RPG, what do you need to start playing. So it is, again, I think this is a very good starter game. And then the first real section kicks off with character design. And I really do like that. I like when RPGs start with their character design, because that's my favorite way of kind of being introduced into the mechanisms and into the world of the game is through the character design and the character creation. I think that's a really good point of view to approach the game. Characters are relatively simple. This is my character, my solo character. We'll talk a little bit later about what makes a solo character different than a non-solo character. But you have your basic kind of attributes, your stats. You have strength, constitution, agility, intelligence, will, and charisma. And when you create a character, you're going to roll 4d6. The box set does come with a set of dice. And you're going to roll 4d6 and you're going to drop the lowest one and keep 3. And you have to do those in order. But once you have placed all 6, you can swap 2 of them. And so I had some pretty good rolls. I ended up with a strength and a con of 14, an agility of 18. That was excellent. An intelligence and a will of 14 and a charisma of 7. I always dump my lowest stat into charisma when I'm playing solo. Actually, when I'm playing with a group as well. I almost never have highly charismatic characters. The main portion of this game is the skill section and also your attribute section. This is a roll low game. So you're trying to hit your attribute score or your skill score and lower. So if I have an acrobatics of 14, if I'm doing something that involves acrobatics as a skill, I need to roll a 14 or under on a d20. If you roll a 1, that is a critical success. If you roll a 20, that is a critical failure. Your skills can be leveled up to an 18 maximum, so there always is a chance of failure. And this game also does not use any experience points or any levels, and it really doesn't use classes either. You level up by checking off the skills that you have used during the game in certain ways. If you ever get a critical success or a critical failure, you get to check off that skill. And then all the skills that have a check mark by them at the end of that session, you roll against that skill. You roll a d20. And if you roll over that skill, you get to increase that skill by 1 point. As far as I can tell, there is never a way to increase your attributes, nor is there really a way to increase your hit points outside of taking a special ability. And all of the characters have access to these heroic abilities and these special powers. So when you first create your character, you will pick your ancestry or your kin. And this has some pretty interesting ancestries here. We have human. That's how I play. I almost always play humans. We have halflings. We have dwarves. Okay, this is pretty typical. We have elves. And then we have mallards and wolfkin. This is so cool. This reminds me back in the early days, like the kind of late 80s, early 90s, with all of the anthropomorphic character comic books, like and role-playing games. We had After the Bomb and TMNT and Howard the Duck, Boris the Bear, Usagi Yojimbo. And I'm really happy to see this mallard character. I think that's super cool. I have this game that I haven't taken a look at yet on the channel, but it's called Duck Quest, the Quackstarter Edition. And this is a whole game about role-playing as ducks and other animals in a really cool and inventive fantasy world. But now I have 2 RPGs with duck people characters. I think that's pretty sweet. Then we get into the professions. So the profession is kind of your profession that your character had before they became an adventurer, before they became a hero. Kind of like a profession in Warhammer Fantasy roleplay, but not quite as restrictive, because what these professions do is they just kind of give you a background. They will give you a starting gear pack, a key attribute that you want to focus on, as well as a group of skills. And when you train your initial skills, a certain number of those trained skills need to come from the starting skills of your profession. For instance, if you were an artisan, you have access to axes, brawling, crafting, hammers, knives, sleight of hand, spot, hidden, and swords. And so a certain number of your starting skills, you would have to choose from those, but then you can choose all of your other skills from the full list of skills here, which includes acrobatics, awareness, bartering, beast lore, bluffing, bushcraft, crafting, evade, healing, hunting, fishing, languages, myth, legends, performance, persuasion, writing, seamanship, sleight of hand, sneaking, spot hidden, and swimming, and then all of your weapon skills for your various weapon groups, which includes axes, bows, brawling, crossbows, hammers, knives, slings, spears, staves, and swords. You also have some secondary skills, and that is with magic users. When you first create your character, depending on the age of the character, you will get to train in a certain number of skills. I was an adult, so I got to train in 10 of my starting skills as a hunter. 6 of those skills had to come from my starting pack as a hunter, and then 4 of them could be any of the skills I chose. Your base skill attribute is based off one of your stats. So, for instance, acrobatics is based off of an agility, and that will be based off of a chart here and towards the back of the character creation section. So, if I had an agility of 18, my base chance for all skills associated with agility is a 7. If I train that skill, I get to double that. So, all of my agility skills that I am trained in, I have a 14. So I have to roll a 14 or under on a d20 in order to perform that skill. Most of my chances, a lot of my base chances are 4. So I have everywhere basically from 4 to 14 in a bunch of these skills. And I can level up any of those skills. I'm not set down a certain path because I chose the hunter as my profession. Your profession will also give you a heroic ability. The heroic ability for the hunter is a companion, so I can charm an animal and have them be my companion for a certain number of time, for a certain amount of time. But again, after I start leveling up, once I get one of my skills up to 18, then I get to choose another heroic ability. And that heroic ability can be anything. So you can really tailor your character to be the exact kind of character that you want to play. You aren't locked into a class, and I really do like that. There's a lot of freedom in how you will build your character and how you will play your character because of those builds. We have a few other derived stats, such as movement is based off of your agility and your kin, your ancestry. And then your damage bonus is based off of your strength or agility. If your strength and agility, depending on the weapon, is less than 12, you have 0 damage bonus. If it's 13 to 16, you have a D4 damage bonus. And if it's a 17, you have a D6 damage bonus. And combat in this game is pretty brutal. Here we go over the heroic abilities. And then we have an option to take a weakness. I took a weakness. I rolled a weakness and at random, and I was reckless. And so I always take big risks without thought of the consequences. And a weakness is just kind of an opportunity to define some of your character in terms of role playing. In addition to that, you can also roll up an optional memento. And I rolled up a simple silver medallion. And we get into our section on gear and encumbrance here. You don't need to keep track of ammo in this game, but you do need to keep track of rations. In any kind of RPG where I need to keep track of specific items of things, I just house rule, I adopt a usage die system. And so my hunter started with a D8 number of rations. I am saying that I have a D8 usage die. For those of you who don't know what a usage die is, you take a D8, and anytime you use a ration, you roll a D8. If you ever roll, let's say an 8, then you go down to the next lowest die. So that would be a 6. The next time I used a ration, I would roll a D6. If I ever rolled a 6, then it would go down to a D4. If I ever rolled a 4, then I would be out of rations and I would have to buy more. I don't like itemizing things, and for encumbrance and for inventory purposes, I always use a usage die system, even if the game doesn't employ it. For me, it just makes things more fun. And speaking of more fun and the experience, you don't need to keep track of experience. You're not going to be gaining experience points. It's kind of a milestone system. If you're playing with a GM, there's a certain number of questions you ask at the end of a session. Did you participate in the game session? Did you explore a new location? Did you defeat one or more dangerous adversaries? Did you overcome an obstacle without using force? And did you give in to your weakness? And if you answered yes to any of those, you can do a skill check to try to upgrade a skill. And like I said, if you ever upgrade a skill to 18, which is the most, then you get to pick a new heroic ability. And so that's kind of how your characters grow in this game. The skill section, this is all about how you roll skills, how you want to roll low. There are boons and banes, which a boon is you have advantage, so you roll 2d20 and take the lowest. If you have a bane, you have disadvantage, you roll 2d20 and take the highest. You are also able to push your roll. So if you roll and you fail, you can push your roll and roll again, and you have to take the second result. However, when you push your roll, you have to choose a stat: strength, con, agility, intelligence, will, or charisma. And depending on which one you use, you will take a condition based off of that. If you use strength, you become exhausted, constitution, sickly, agility, dazed, intelligence, angry, will, scared, and charisma, disheartened. And so you can push rolls 6 times, and then you need to rest and you need to work on healing those conditions. So it's a way to mitigate some bad luck. One final derived stat here is your willpower points, and that is based on your will. And willpower points are a currency that you can spend to do magic spells and to do some abilities. And you can get those back by taking a rest during sitting out of a round of combat, or taking a long rest so you can gain that currency back. Then we go into a section that goes all over our core skills, and then we get into our heroic abilities. And this is where the game really shines as far as character development goes, because there are a whole bunch of things like backstabbing. You can become focused. You can specialize in disguise. You can be a berserker, cat-like reflexes, a contortionist, fancy footwork. You can have good intuition. You can be a musician, a pathfinder, a lone wolf, a master chef. You can have sea legs. You can be a master blacksmith. So all kinds of cool ways to develop your character. And then we get into combat. And combat, like I said, is pretty deadly. But I think this game does a good job of straddling the line between deadly and heroic. The weapons do a ton of damage, and your hit points are strictly derived off of your charisma. So whatever your charisma roll is, or I'm sorry, your constitution, whatever your constitution score is, that's how many hit points you have. And it's really hard to gain more hit points. It's pretty easy to heal, but you're always going to have pretty much the base number of hit points. And look at this. A great sword does 2d10 damage, 2d10 points of damage, plus whatever bonus the monster might have, or the NPC might have. So you are dealing with a lot of damage. One swipe from a greatsword can totally kill any character in this game, or can bring them down to 0 HP, I should say. Because in combat, once you are at 0 HP, you aren't dead. You can actually be rallied by other players. And in the solo game, you can rally yourself to keep on fighting and to keep on doing heroic things. If you drop to or if you go into negative hit points, the same amount of hit points you have. So for instance, if I ever went to negative 14 hit points with one hit, I would just be flat out killed, probably beheaded or cut in half or something nasty like that. But as long as I'm down to 0 hit points, I can rally myself, I can get up, and I can keep on fighting. And I can even do a few successful death rolls, which are charisma rolls. And if you get 3 of those, you can actually heal D6 hit points during combat. So that's a really neat system. It also uses an initiative card system, and every round of combat, you deal out a new initiative card to all of the combatants. And so the rounds are kind of constantly changing. The players can pass their round in order for the NPCs to go first, because maybe the players want to react rather than act. They want to use their dodge skill or their parrying skill. You really do need to think about the action economy in this game, because when it is your turn, you can move and you can do one thing, such as dash or use an item, make a ranged attack, make a melee attack. You can rally, apply first aid, and so on. But you can only do one thing, and you're very squishy. But again, you do have those opportunities to keep pressing on, to keep doing cool things, even when you go to 0 hit points. And so I really do like that in this game. Armor, you don't have an armor class at all. You just roll to hit, and armor prevents damage. Armor soaks up damage. And also weapons do have a durability score, and that durability score is kind of a hit points for the weapon for when they parry. And if that ever goes down to 0, they can soak up that much damage when they parry. And then if that goes down to 0, you will need to repair your items. If you go down to 0 hit points, you can also use an optional rule here to have severe injuries, and those can also add some chances to do some interesting role playing based off of those. Then there are things like fear and darkness and poison, disease, so all of these other hazards that the book goes into. And improvised weapons. It comes with a deck of improvised weapon cards, and I think these are really interesting, and it's a super cool way to add some variety to the combat. Because when you are going into combat, the GM or as a solo player, let's say we were fighting some spiders in a forest, and we could shuffle up these forest improvised weapon cards, and we could deal out 2. And so during this combat, in this arena, wherever we are fighting in this forest, we have a boulder and a viper. And so these are 2 things that the combatants can use one time during this combat. And as soon as they are used, you can discard it. So it's a really cool way of adding some variety and randomness to the combat arenas. And we have different improvised weapons for the forests. We have different improvised weapons for caves, such as a stalactite, a torch, a stalagmite, a puddle, some bats, and we also have those for the inn, a boiling cauldron, burning firewood, a rummaging pig, a wine bottle, a chandelier, and so on. I think this adds a lot of spice to the combat. The combat in this game is actually pretty fun because it's really quick. There are 3 schools of magic: animism, elementalism, and mentalism. I rarely use magic in my game, so I almost always skip over the magic here. But there are quite a few spells, so if you are into magic using characters, I think you will be pretty happy. Then we get into the gear section here. We have all of our melee weapons, ranged weapons, clothes, musical instruments, trade goods, and studies and magic and trade goods continued, light sources, tools, medicine containers, all kinds of gear for hunting and fishing, means of travel, different animals and services. I do think that the loot system in this game is one of my biggest criticisms. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the review section. And finally, the book is going to end up with the bestiary. Now, there are kind of 2 different kinds of beasts, 2 different kinds of creatures in the bestiary. We have ones that are kind of like NPCs, and those would be kind of like your standard orcs or goblins or skeletons. Basically, you're kind of humanoid shaped and humanoid sized creatures, and then also your bandits and your thieves and things like that. These are going to be NPCs. And let's talk about these standees right now, because the game comes with a whole bunch of absolutely awesome standees. What a super cool thing for this RPG to come with. I wished more RPGs came with standees like this. I love it. They're so handy, so useful. This is my character here. This is my character's 2 friends that live in the village that he visits when he decides to go in and do some shopping and some trading. And then we have a whole bunch of other standees for all of your other player characters or NPCs. So very, very awesome. I love those. But we also have things in the bestiary that are considered monsters, and that would be like demons and trolls and dragons or giants and trolls. Monsters never roll to hit. Monsters always hit, and they always hit hard, and they always do nasty things. Monsters just roll on their AI table, and this determines what they do on their attack. So if you're fighting a monster, you really need to think about how you are going to approach that encounter. And you can get wiped out really quickly if you're not careful in this game. This is not a game that you're expected to just fight everything. The final section of the rulebook here is the journeys section. And this actually has a lot of really handy charts, I think, for the solo player in this section here. We have a travel mishaps section. We have a section on typical NPCs. So if you just need a really fast NPC like a guard or an adventurer or a scholar, you have your stats here. We have a D4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 20 chart on creating NPCs. You just roll all of those dice once and you go in line to figure out your NPCs. We have that same kind of chart for rolling up random quests. random journeys, and random adventure sites. Super, super handy. So this game doesn't have detailed rules on hex crawling or detailed rules on dungeon diving. It's a pretty kind of abstracted system as far as traveling, as far as adventuring goes. It's kind of a point crawl system. So in addition to the main rule book, you will also get this adventure guide. And this is one of the better collections of adventures I have seen. And I think that's because it strongly correlates to the locations on this included map. And so a lot of these drawn locations have an adventure associated with them. And it's not just an adventure, it's a collection of random encounters, of different NPCs, of different things going on in that particular location, in that adventure site. And so while this adventure book is specifically written for a GM-led campaign for traditional role-playing, it's also very, very handy for the solo player. And that's why I think it's really cool. It has a good history, a good section on what is going on in the world as the players are introduced to that world. We have these demonic omens here. I have used this section here as kind of like the omen section in Morkborg, and we'll talk a little bit about how I use that section there when we get to the solo section of this video. We have a detailed description of Outskirt. That's kind of like this main town right here, the main town in the Misty Vale. And so we have a rumors section. We have a random events section. This rumors section also is duplicated in these adventure cards. And each one of these adventure cards details a little rumor that is associated with one of the adventures in this campaign. And these adventures in this campaign can be played in any order, or they can be played as one-off adventures. So there are a lot of different ways to use this book. We have a chart of random events in the counter in the city. And then we get our detailed look at the city with the various locations and NPCs that are in the town of Outskirts. And then we get to this section here, which is super useful for the soloist because we have random charts for journeys. So if you are around Outskirt, if you are in the Magna Woods or the Iron Forest or the Haunted Marshes or at the foot of mountains, you have random charts of random events that you can roll on and different things for you to encounter. That's super cool. And the rest of the book is your adventures at these particular and specific adventure sites. You will have a situation, kind of a hook, what's going on there. You will have random events at that adventure site. And then all of your various locations and NPCs and monsters. So very handy, lots of cool information. This is a fun adventure book to read. In addition to those two books, you will also get your official Dragonbane solo rules. And this section here is called Alone in Deep Fall Breach. Deep Fall Breach is this section down here. There is a temple there, a church, and a crevice there leading deep into the bowels of the earth. This is very much like Tristram here with a dungeon in Diablo 1. That's what I was thinking of. But this goes into details about how to play Dragonbane solo. And your solo character is a much more powerful character than a normal character. You are considered to be an army of one. And so when you are in combat, you get to draw 2 initiative cards. And so you will get to have 2 complete turns in every round of combat. And you are also a sole survivor. So for 3 will points, you can push your roll without suffering a condition. So you can basically choose when you want to have advantage on a roll, and that will cost you 3 willpower points. As an example, my character here has 14 willpower points. So I could do that about 4 times before I would need to take a rest and regenerate some of my willpower points. We have our general oracle here for yes, no questions, a number of things from none to numerous, a scale chart from small to immense, power from weak to incredible, quality from flawed to precious, and reaction from hostile to friendly. We have an inspiration table, a sparks table here that you can roll a d20 on 3 different columns to get an action, an attribute, and a thing. We have a chart here for critical fails and critical hits, certain things that might happen. Simple NPC templates for minions and bosses for when you need to just generate a really quick enemy for an encounter. When you are encountering an NPC, we have this NPC attack table. Depending on if the NPC is attacking with melee, ranged, sneaky, or magic, they will do certain things on a roll of a d6. This is super cool. It keeps combat interesting and kind of chaotic. We also have tips on surviving solo play because this is kind of a dangerous game. So this talks about some certain things you might have at your disposal for healing, how to approach failure. What happens when you fail as a soloist? What should you do? How should you overcome failure as a soloist to keep playing, to keep the story going, to keep the fun going? And then we get into the quests for this particular solo adventure here, where we are diving deep into Deepfall Breach, working for this guy named Ingolfar Stonegaze, and he's sending us down into these dungeons on a series of missions. And we have these various exploration tables, and the missions themselves are kind of point crawls. For instance, the first mission here in the Reforged Shard is to find the captive orc. And we have these points. We have the Plunging Path, the Charred Tomb, Unknown, and Fiendish Altar. So for the 2 unknown points on our point crawl, we would roll up what happens on those using these random charts. And as you complete the quest, each quest in this adventure, you can go back to town and level up, or not level up, but take breaks and rest and find out what's going on in town. And so this is really cool. I like these solo rules. They're pretty simple. They're straightforward, but it also gives you enough inspiration to keep playing once you have finished this book. You will also get a deck of treasure cards. And the loot system, the treasure in this game, again, is one of my main criticisms of the game. But these are all things that you can quickly draw for when your character finds a treasure chest and you're looking for, just kind of loot and gold and things that you can sell when you get back into town. We also get some pre-gen characters. We get Krisanna the Bold, Baston Bloodjaw, Makander of Half Bay, Orla Moonsilver, and the Archmaster Aeodon. And then we also get some blank character sheets. And finally, we do get a battle board for kind of an interior dungeon and then an exterior kind of a plains or forest or something like that. So yeah, you get a lot of stuff with this game, and I think it's pretty cool. I think it's definitely worth the investment. And if you're looking for a neat game that just kind of comes with everything that you might need to play with a group and to play solo, Dragonbane is pretty cool. So let's get into my review portion of the game. And again, this is all from a solo perspective. So bonuses are pluses first, things I liked. I like the character creation. It's fast. I liked those heroic abilities because you can make the character become exactly the kind of character you want to play. I like that we aren't locked into a class system, and I like all of the various skills, especially for solo play, because it allows me to focus on the things my character can do. It's very mechanical, but in a solo situation, I kind of like that because it keeps things focused and it keeps things moving. I like the advancement system. I like that I don't have to keep track of XP. I don't have to keep writing XP down. Basically, there are some additional rules and on a different specific way to level up or to advance using the solo rules. But I like that when I use a skill well, when I get a critical hit on a skill, or also when I get a critical miss, because I will learn from that failure. I will have an opportunity to upgrade that skill. I think that is a really neat system. I like that Dragonbane straddles that line between being deadly and being heroic. You need to think about combat. You need to think about each encounter. But if things go bad, there are ways to mitigate that bad luck. You can rally yourself. There are ways to heal in the middle of combat. Your characters heal naturally outside of combat. And so there are good ways to make yourself feel like a heroic character while also playing in this deadly world. And in that sense, I think Dragonbane does kind of capture that sword and sorcery style of gaming that I appreciate. I also like the solo rules. I think it's great that this game comes with solo rules. I think the solo rules are adaptable to be played with other things outside of just the solo adventures, and they give you enough leeway to have freedom to do interesting and cool things. I also like that your solo character is a more powerful version of a normal character in the game. I think these two heroic abilities and the fact that they allow you to rally yourself really does give you, as the solo player, the freedom to have really fun adventures. I also like all of those charts, all of those random charts in the back of the rule book, and all of the encounter charts in the adventure book. I think those are really good. They're very handy for the soloist as well. On to my criticisms. I wish all of those charts, I wish all of those handy charts from both books were actually collected in the solo book, because it would mean less time flipping through three different books to find the chart that you want. I'm going to see if these books are available as PDFs, and if they are, I will purchase the PDF version of this game just so I can make a printout of all of the charts that I feel are necessary to facilitate my solo play. I also wish that there were random monster charts based on threat level. There's nothing like that in this game. And so when you are putting together an encounter for a solo session, it is kind of hard to know which of these creatures is appropriate for the level that you are at, for the threat level that you are working with. And so that is kind of a drawback. I wish there were random charts based on threat level for the different monsters in the bestiary. I also think the loot system is really lacking in this game. From what I can tell, there isn't a single mention of any kind of magical weapons or any kind of unique loot in the game. And that's really odd, because this is not a low magic game. This is a game with three very powerful, distinct schools of magic. This is a game with magical creatures, with ghosts, with supernatural things happening. And there are no rules for magic swords or magic axes or magic armor. I don't even know really what a magic sword does in this game. I'm not sure. There are no GM rules for creating unique gear, for creating your own kind of bespoke magical weapons. There are some magical spells that you can use to enchant weapons. So I imagine that as a character, you could find a wizard, you could find some kind of magic user to cast one of these magic seal, charge, or permanence spells on a weapon to imbue that weapon with some kind of magical ability. But I have no idea how that would actually play out in the game. Getting treasure from this treasure deck is really boring. It's usually just some kind of mundane sword or shield or a piece of jewelry. So yeah, really lacking in the magical items in the magical treasure department. And that, for me, that's a pretty big bummer, because those are some of my favorite things to encounter in these games. I think more GM things in general would be really good. More random encounters, more ways to handle going on journeys across the land. I know this isn't a hex crawl. It isn't a detailed dungeon crawl. That's not the kind of game this is. This game is supposed to be kind of abstracting out a lot of the time crunch and just kind of focusing on the important aspects of the journey of the adventure. And the game is supposed to be designed for quick setup. And it doesn't take a lot of time on the GM's part to put together an adventure. But I would like to see a more robust GM section, or maybe an entire GM book for Dragonbane. I love this map. And so let's talk a little bit about my solo setup here. So I am playing as Joran Shadowbolt, and Joran is a hunter. And Joran lives in the outskirts of Magna Woods near this ghost town over here. And Joran, at one time in his life, was in a mercenary group with Groon and Sarah. And they were in this mercenary group, and the group disbanded when the group's leader betrayed them. And Joran became really jaded, and he wanted nothing to do with anyone. So he moved out to the middle of nowhere. And Groon and Sarah, they live in outskirt in the main town. And about once a month, maybe twice a month, Joran makes the journey to outskirt. He goes to his little fantasy Costco there to stock up on supplies, to trade his pelts, and to listen to rumors and things that are going on, and take up random mercenary jobs, random adventuring jobs to go out and earn a living. But mostly he avoids large groups of people because he just doesn't trust people anymore. So he's kind of a lone wolf hunter. Now, to add a little bit of kind of a timer of a ticking threat to the background of my world, when I started thinking about my solo campaign, I came to this demonic omens table. There are things like dark clouds, meteors, rain of frogs, and I rolled a 10, which is a volcano. So one of the volcanoes on this map here, one of the mountains is a volcano, and it is going to be erupting sometime soon. And so I divided the map into quadrants 1, 2, 3, and 4. I rolled a D4. I rolled a 2. So it's this northeast quadrant. One of the mountains in this mountain range is a volcano. There have been some earthquakes, and that volcano is going to erupt at some point. So that's kind of like one of those omens in Morkborg, and that could lead to a catastrophic effect on this land, on the people, on the things that are going on. And that's going to be a usage die 20. And so at the beginning of each day, I will roll a d20. If I ever roll a 20, and then I will go down to a d12, d10, d8, d6, d4, and so on. And then if I ever get down to a d4 and I roll a 4, then that volcano erupts, and I have to deal with these kind of apocalyptic consequences of that happening. So that is just something that's kind of like this evil presence that's causing this natural disaster ticking away in the background of this solo campaign. And then I created 3 kind of rumors, or used 3 different things from this book, from this material, to have 3 different adventures that I could go on at any time. The first thing I did is I rolled up a random rumor, a random quest on that quest chart here. And so I rolled 3, 1, 1, 8, 8, 3, 3. So 3, the quest here. Around the warmth of a campfire, a messenger named Rowena of the Vale, a haughty knight, wants to protect a sword from Silrod's treachery. Okay, so what does that mean? I have no idea, but that is something that I heard. I heard a rumor about that. There's some haughty knight out here who is trying to protect this sword from something. And then to associate that quest with some inspirational words, with some spark words, I rolled escape, ancient, and treasure. So that is something to think about. That is some possibility of an adventure that I can go on. The next thing I did is I drew one of these adventure cards, which would correspond to an adventure site that is detailed in the adventure book. And I actually drew Dead Eyes Cave. A monstrous beast has crawled down from the mountains and attacked Blind Hildy's farm southeast of Outskirt. There are whispers about a cave full of torn out eyes, but also great treasures and powerful weapons from ill-fated adventurers who met their fate in the Dead Eyes Cave. And so I know I've heard about Dead Eyes Cave. Maybe as one of my shopping trips in Outskirt, I heard about this cave, and that's over here to the southeast of Outskirt. And so I can also go on an adventure here. Additionally, finally, I can go through one of the quests in Alone in Deep Fall Breach. And so I've kind of given myself a few possibilities, a few different areas to explore. And Groon and Sarah, they are working with the main NPC for these quests in Deep Fall Breach. And Groon and Sarah, they live and they work in Outskirt. And again, they are my old companions. And they're kind of the only two people I really trust anymore. And so I like to go back to Outskirt to visit them, to hear rumors, to kind of figure out what's going on. And these two characters are kind of like Jaren's lifeline. They're his last attachment to his old world. They are the kind of represent the last little remnants of humanity, of empathy that Jaren might have. And hopefully nothing bad happens to to Sarah and Groon, because that would really push Jaren over the edge there. But I love all of the different ways you can come up with adventures in this game, and it really does give me that feel like this is my sandbox and this is my really cool world that I get to play in. And so I am looking forward to playing Dragonbane more. So, all right, you guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this look and this review and this overview of Dragonbane from the solo perspective, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.